My family robbed me and humiliated me, but I finally found strength and got my life back. I never thought I'd get to this point. I've always considered myself an organized, down-to-earth person, someone who knew how to handle money and life. I worked from an early age, giving up a lot to keep everything in order, but deep down, I was hostage to something I struggled to realize: my own family. For years, I accepted being the responsible one, the one who solved everything, the one who covered up the holes, the one who fixed things when everyone else messed up. I felt obligated to be the foundation, and at first I even thought it was nice, but over time, it killed me inside. The day everything changed was when I discovered someone had tampered with my account without even asking. They stole from me blatantly and even had the nerve to mock me when I confronted them. At that moment, I felt a mixture of anger, shame, disgust, and also a weariness I'd never felt in my life. It was the breaking point. My name is Reginaldo. I'm 42 years old, and that was the day I realized I'd been trapped in an invisible prison for a long time. The worst part is that the key to this prison had always been with me, but I didn't have the courage to use it. When I saw my zero balance account after a family lunch, my entire body trembled. I remembered exactly how much I'd saved, every penny earned through hours of work, sleepless nights and weekends I'd missed. And suddenly, it was all gone. It wasn't the first time I'd helped my sister, who was filling in the holes she and her husband had created, but this time was different. They didn't ask. They simply took me, as if I were an ATM available 24 hours a day. That day, I didn't cry. I was in shock. I sat on the couch staring at my phone screen as if it were a lie, as if the bank had made some mistake. But when I started looking, I saw the transfers, saw the names, saw the proof printed in front of me. I went to the kitchen, where everyone was still laughing, and asked, my voice cracking, what had happened. My sister laughed as if I were being dramatic, and my brother-in-law blurted out that they needed it more than I did. It was like being punched. I was expecting an apology, or at least some acknowledgement that what they did was wrong. But what I got was mockery. And what hurt most was looking at my parents and hearing my mother say that I shouldn't be so harsh, that I was the strong one in the family. In that moment, I felt small. It didn't matter how much I'd done for them, how many times I'd given up, living my life to hold on to theirs. I was just the provider, the walking depository. My father, never one to interfere, even added that I was causing drama, that money recovers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but what came out was silence. I felt a crushing weight on my chest. The feeling was that everyone was against me, and that I was wrong for expecting respect. I looked at each of them and saw clearly. I had never been seen as a son or a brother. I was just the guy who solved problems, who paid, who provided. And in that moment I knew, if I didn't do anything, that would never change. I got up from the table without saying anything. I went to my room and grabbed all the receipts, screenshots, and statements. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I felt betrayed, invaded, as if something had been ripped. For me, not just money, it was my dignity that was at stake. I stayed awake all night, looking at the evidence, and between fits of rage and despair, an idea began to form. I needed to report it. It was the only way out. I never imagined I would one day have to call the police against my own family. But that night, for the first time in years, I thought of myself, and only myself. The next morning I was devastated. I hadn't slept at all. It felt like a giant weight was crushing my chest. I got up early, looked in the mirror, and saw a guy I didn't recognize. Deep circles under my eyes, a hard expression, a tiredness that wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I trembled, thinking about what would happen next. I was afraid of their reaction, afraid of what would happen to my life after taking this step. But along with this fear, I felt a new feeling, one I barely recognized: freedom. A part of me was relieved just thinking about putting an end to this. I knew that if I didn't do something, I would slowly die. So I took action. I went straight to the bank and asked for all the statements and documents I could find. I wanted solid proof, so they wouldn't call me crazy. The clerk noticed I was nervous and asked if everything was okay. I simply replied that it was a family matter, saying it hurt. It felt like I was admitting a shame I'd hidden for years, but I was determined. I left with a folder full of papers, went straight to the police station, and sat in front of the counter as if I was about to collapse. I had never reported anyone in my life, much less my own sister and brother-in-law, but I had to. When I started to tell the police officer, my voice cracked. I was shaking. It felt like I was confessing to a crime, not reporting one. The feeling of guilt was overwhelming. Even though I was the victim, I felt wrong for being there. I felt ashamed, afraid of judgment, afraid they wouldn't believe me. But the police officer listened to everything, asked for my documents, and told me I was right to report it. It was a shock. For the first time, someone outside my family circle didn't make me feel guilty for demanding respect. I left the police station exhausted, but with a strange feeling that I was recovering something I hadn't even known I'd lost. The next few days were hell. Texts, calls, emotional blackmail. My sister called me ungrateful. My brother-in-law threatened to expose me. My mother crying on the phone saying I was destroying the family. I hung up and cried afterward. It wasn't easy. Each call felt like a punch. But at the same time, each time I didn't back down, I grew a little stronger. I began to realize how much I'd spent my entire life trying to please, trying to be accepted, trying to be the good son. And now I was being seen as a villain just because I'd said enough. There was one day that was a turning point. My mother showed up at my house unannounced. She cried, saying I was ruining everything, that my father was disappointed, that I would regret it. I listened silently. In the past, I would have given in, given money, withdrawn the charges. But that day, I took a deep breath and said, enough. I told her I loved her, but I wouldn't allow this anymore. She stared at me with a mixture of anger and shock, as if she didn't know me. And in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before. I was in control. For the first time, I was choosing myself. After that day, I said enough to my mother. Something inside me changed. I still felt pain, still wondered if I'd been too harsh, but for the first time, I managed to sleep a few hours straight. It seemed like little, but it was a huge relief. The guilt still lingered. I constantly wondered if I was destroying my family, but when I remembered what they did to me, the humiliation, the theft, the mockery, I took a deep breath and repeated to myself, I'm not guilty. It was almost like a mantra. In this process, I realized how alone I was. I had few true friends, and most always assumed my life was peaceful because I projected the image of someone organized who could handle everything. No one knew the price I paid behind the scenes. It was difficult to face this loneliness, but it was also liberating. I no longer had to maintain the lie that I was fine. I no longer had to carry the world on my shoulders. I started admitting to those close to me that I was suffering, that I was going through a difficult situation. And curiously, some of them reached out to me in a way I had never received from my own family. The hardest part was dealing with the emptiness after the cut. The house was silent, my cell phone hardly rang anymore, family gatherings stopped, and as toxic as it was, I missed it. It's strange to say this, but anyone who experiences emotional dependence understands. We get used to even what hurts, and when we cut, it hurts. I cried alone, feeling lost, but at the same time, I felt that silence was necessary. It was as if, finally, I had space to hear my own voice. The investigation began. My sister and brother-in-law sent me aggressive messages saying I was ruining their lives. My parents kept telling me I was being cruel. It was as if the entire weight of guilt had fallen on me, but unlike before, I didn't crumble. I kept everything, every screenshot, every audio recording, every threat. I wanted to be sure I wouldn't go back on my word. And each time I recorded more evidence, I felt like I was building a wall between me and them, a wall of protection I'd never had before. One detail that stood out was the attitude of Kelly, my brother-in-law's sister. She was never close, but she always observed everything from afar. One day she texted me saying she admired me for having the courage to do what no one else would have. That moved me more than I expected. It was as if, finally, someone recognized what I was going through. It wasn't about wanting applause, but about not feeling completely alone in that war. Her message was a breath of fresh air, proof that I wasn't crazy for wanting to protect myself. Over time, I began to realize I was relearning how to live. Small things, which I hadn't even noticed before, began to have value. Having a quiet coffee in the morning without my phone ringing asking for money, coming home from work, and truly relaxing without someone pressuring me to solve someone else's problems. At first, it felt strange, as if I'd forgotten how to have peace. But then I began to understand that this was what I needed. Silence, a simple routine, space for myself. It was during this period that I began to see that my life wasn't just obligations and bills to pay. I also faced the fear of being alone. For years, my life revolved around others. I didn't know what it was like to think of myself without guilt. When I cut ties, I felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness, but little by little I realized that this void could be filled with better things. I started walking and started cooking my own meals again, things I'd abandoned because I was always rushing to meet family needs. I was relearning how to take care of myself. I won't lie, anger still haunted me. Sometimes I remembered my sister's laughter, my brother-in-law's mockery, my parents' cold gaze, and my whole body boiled. But instead of letting this anger destroy me, I began to use it as fuel. Each time I remembered it, I reassured myself that I wasn't going back, that I deserved respect. It was as if, finally, I understood the value of the word no. The legal process took a long time, and in the midst of it all, I continued to receive attempts at manipulation. There were days when I almost gave in. The emotional toll was heavy. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the feeling of seeing my account empty, the pain in my chest, the humiliation of hearing that they needed it more than I did. This kept me holding on. I couldn't erase what happened, but I could choose never to let it happen again. A curious thing happened during this period. I began to feel lighter at work. Without the constant pressure of carrying my family, I could truly focus, perform better, even smile more. Colleagues noticed the difference, and that's when it dawned on me that I had spent years living a life that wasn't my own. I was respected outside the home, admired for my efforts, but within my family, I was reduced to a walking wallet. When I understood this, I felt enormous relief. I was finally freeing myself from the invisible prison I had fed myself for years. Over time, the police investigation began to move forward. My sister and brother-in-law faced legal consequences, and even if it didn't resolve all the pain I felt, it felt like justice. I didn't expect applause or recognition from my family, but seeing the truth coming to light gave me strength. Every step they took to defend themselves reminded me that I had chosen the hardest, but also the right path. It was as if I was regaining the dignity that had been stolen from me years ago. With every call I didn't answer, every message I ignored, I felt my space grow. I was learning that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-care. The feeling of being in charge of my own life is inexplicable. It's not that the pain has disappeared, because some scars remain, but now they remind me that I survived, that I was stronger than years of manipulation and emotional abuse. I began to respect myself in a way I never had before. What impacted me most was realizing that I could feel love for my family without giving up on myself. I still think about my parents and my sister, but I'm no longer their hostage. The feeling of freedom is incredible. I learned that there's no need to feel guilty to walk away from someone who hurts, and that sometimes the most loving act is to protect yourself, to say no without fear, without shame. I finally understood that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone's approval. Today, I look back at my life and see that I've achieved something I've never had: peace. The peace of sleeping soundly, the peace of planning my future, the peace of living without fear of being exploited. I still feel twinges of anger or sadness, but they don't control me. I've learned to use my inner strength, to value every achievement, every moment of tranquility. I've discovered that self-respect is what defines one's life, and that courage isn't about not feeling fear, but moving forward despite it. If I could leave a message for anyone going through something similar, I would say that there's no shame in protecting yourself. There's no weakness in saying enough. It's painful, it's complicated, and you'll feel fear, sadness, anger all at once. But when you find the strength within yourself to take the first step, life changes. I'm not perfect, I still bear scars, but today I own my story. I chose my dignity, I chose my well-being, and that's why I can finally look forward without fear.